Mr. Corral, can you confirm the recording has been started?
Yes, sir.
All right, I'm going to officially call this meeting to order of the WIFA Water Supply Development Committee. It's 1 p.m. I'll call the roll. Mr. Cook.
Here.
Ms. Horstman.
Present.
Mr. Kim. Not here. Jonathan Lyons.
Present.
Richard Lunt.
Present.
Sue Montgomery.
Here.
And I am here. Buchanan Davis is present. For the record, please remember to identify yourself when you make a motion or request to speak. And those attending virtually, please ensure you are unmuted for any votes. In addition, if any member wishes to depart the meeting, please announce your departure for our recorded meeting minutes. Moving to agenda item number 2, disclosure of conflicts of interest. Have we received any disclosures, Joe?
Afternoon, Joe Satelli, General Counsel. No disclosures have been submitted for today's meeting. Thank you.
All right, no conflicts of interest. We'll move to agenda item 3. Pass it over to our Director, Chelsea, to lead the discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate all of you being here. It's good to have kind of the first, at least functioning meeting. I'm here in the WIFA boardroom. Don't have a whole lot to say because the agenda pretty much speaks for itself here today, but I do want to speak specifically to our applicants here today and just say thank you for your patience with us. We know that this has been quite the process of you submitting applications, us getting you on an agenda. I know there are applicants listening today that still have yet to have their project listed on an agenda. We are moving both quickly and also strategically and making sure that we give every application the fair shake that it's due in our analysis. And so thanks for being patient with us as we do that. We recognize a very, very acute need, especially in rural Arizona, for these for this funding. And so we're glad that we have an opportunity for you to be before us today. And just thank you for coming to WIFA and letting us potentially be a part of your solution. With that, Mr. Chairman, I have nothing else.
Thank you. Any questions for our Director, Chelsea? Then we'll move to our agenda item 4, which is the Water Supply Development Fund financial status. Denise?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just real quick, want to give the committee an update of where we are financially with this fund. We started the year with $152 million. We do have interest earnings on this fund of about $3.4 million, bringing that up to $155.6. We have approved $24.8 million in applications, and we have admin costs of $155,000, which brings the balance to about $130.7 million. So these numbers are going to change. If you go to the next slide, one thing I just want to remind the committee is the resolution that we passed is a percentage of the total fund. So everyone's talking about the $60 million. That will change because the amount of money in the fund is changing, so that the percentage will change slightly. With that being said, I just, for simplicity, focused on the $60 million at this point in time. What this chart is showing you is kind of a projection of where we're at. If you look at the bottom, you can see in April, we're approaching the $60 million in grants amount. So we're approaching the 40%. So what we're anticipating based on the applications to date, that there'll be some decisions or at least a reevaluation or just awarding all loans probably in the April-May time period. So the other thing to show you is we also projected activity based on applications as they're coming in that we've seen historically. If we do switch to more loans, maybe those applications will slow down a bit. We have not reflected that. So this just tells you exactly where we're at. Is there any questions on this?
Any questions for staff? Thank you. That sounds good. We'll move on to our regular agenda. Before we do so, members of the public, if you want to speak on a specific agenda item, you may request to speak prior to the discussion on each item. For instructions how to submit a speaker's card, please refer to the notes and proceedings at the end of the meeting agenda. We can get speaker cards if you want to speak for any of these items. Agenda item number 5, the Water Supply Development Project Priority Lists. Lindsay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I will just briefly go over a few slides, but I do encourage the committee members to take a look at our project priority list, see what's going to be upcoming in future agendas for you all. We did try to make some modifications and updates to how we're presenting the list, so hopefully that is helpful for you all in reviewing the applications that are still in the queue. So in total, we have almost 100 million requested from 54 applications. Based on how the PPL application scoring process is, the list currently has $32 million in loans and $65.8 million in grants, which does mean that we are now over the amount for grant requests available based on that limit of approximately 60 million. We did add a double horizontal line now on our PPL to indicate the point at which grant funding may no longer be available, and it's going to show up right after the rank number 45 in the list. So all the projects presented today are before that double cutoff line, and projects will not be presented for the committee's recommendation until all the other higher ranked projects are presented. Also, we did split the PPL into 2 attachments, so you'll see one that shows the list summary with the status of the projects color-coded and the loan and grant amounts included, and then we have the second attachment, which has the full project descriptions. On the main list, you're going to see the projects for today's agenda color-coded with the light blue. We are working our way down the priority list, and we'll be presenting them as much as possible in the order they are ranked, but we also are determining that agenda on the date and the completeness of the applicant's second application, the project finance application. So for today, we do have 10 projects ready for the committee's review. They are requesting just over $20 million. As you'll see, most of the requests are for 100% grants, and since we are focusing on that top portion of our list, that does make some sense. As we work our way down the list, you'll see more projects coming up with loan amounts included. If we go to the next slide here, just to give you a breakdown of what types of projects are being submitted. So we have a small number of conservation projects, so it's 2 meter projects and 1 turf project within that category. All of those are pending and will be presented in the future. We have 37 conveyance projects for about 61 million. After today's meeting, you'll have reviewed about half of them. These are mostly typical types of projects where they're upgrades for water systems, new wells, storage tanks, replacing water lines, those types of typical activities, plus a few out of the box kind of different types of projects as well. We have the recharge and reuse category with 12 projects currently requesting about $30 million. And after today's meeting, we'll review about half of them, and then 2 stormwater projects for about $3 million, and both of those have already been approved. I do want to flag, just as you're looking through the project priority list, that all of the projects on this list have been evaluated as technically eligible for this funding source. However, it will be a decision point, I believe, coming up for the committee and the board. We have projects that are for things like upgrades to wastewater systems where the recharge and reuse benefits may be more incidental as opposed to the main goal of the project. So as we work through this list, there'll be opportunities for the committee and board to really determine if that water supply fund is the best source of funding or versus a different source, possibly like the clean water SRF. So just something to keep in mind as you're working through the list, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Lindsay? So still significant amount available on both loans and grants. We are still taking applications.
Absolutely, yes.
Was there someone online that had a question? Okay. Great. Then we will dive into some of the specific projects. Agenda item 6. This is item 6 is a recommend for approval of financial assistance for Elfrida Water Improvement District. Lindsay, would you lead us the discussion on this one?
Lindsay, just real quick. Before Lindsay starts that, just a note for the applicants that are with us in the room today. The staff will go through your application. The board will ask staff any questions. If the board has questions for you, we will call you up here to our congressional testimony table over here. There's a handheld mic for you to use to pick up in the room and on Zoom, but we will only call you up if the committee has questions. So just wanted to let you know that before. Sorry for the interruption, Lindsay. Go ahead.
No problem. All right, so first up on the agenda for projects, we have the Elfrida Water Improvement District. They are requesting just under $2 million to make necessary improvements for their small system, which is in the Douglas AMA. They plan to drill 2 new wells, rehab an existing well, add a chlorination system, add a water tank and a booster pump, and replace water lines. This project will address several critical water supply challenges Elfrida faces, including declining water levels, aging infrastructure, and inadequate storage capacity. Their water distribution system consists of aging asbestos cement pipes and is prone to frequent leaks and breakage, causing water loss and contamination risks. Therefore, this project will decrease water loss, increase water supply reliability, and ensure safe drinking water for Elfrida. The district has one existing WIFA loan from 2018 for $85,000, which is in good standing. However, the ability to take on new debt is limited, and if this request was a loan, the debt service would exceed the revenue available for debt service payments. Therefore, at this time, they don't have the capacity to take on this amount of additional debt without an adjustment in revenues or ongoing expenses. We have the applicant's representatives listed on the slide if there's any questions, and I'll turn it back to you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
Yes, Lindsay,
Mr. Lund?
has the Elfrida, have they had any rate increases since they put on the,
That is a great question. I'm going to look over to our financial people to see if they know, and if they don't, we might need to call on the applicant.
I don't recall them having one, but they can confirm that. Not since I'm.
Scott, can you put your mic on?
Oh. Sorry, I mean, you might want to ask the applicant, but I, from recommending what, or remembering what I'm seeing, there was been a long time since there's been a rate increase.
so it's been several years, correct? Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Do we have any questions for the applicant?
I would be interested in, when was your latest rate increase?
You want to come on up?
We have the applicant? Yes, we do.
And as you're coming up, I'll just ask you, before you speak, just identify yourself for the record so we know who you are.
I'm Robin Barnum.
Press the button on that mic, make sure the light's green.
Robin Barnum.
Now
I
you
think
can.
you're good.
Now you can.
Did it work? Okay.
Yep. now.
Andy Warren, Board President.
Robin Barnum, General Manager.
When was your last rate increase?
We just had a council meeting last month. We decided to increase our startup fees. We were going to revisit the tier system that we're currently using. We are kind of in a low-income society, so we have to kind of
Gradual.
gradual.
Thank you.
Okay, then.
That's the only question I had.
Any other questions for the applicant? Any discussion amongst the committee? Do we have any other public comment for this item?
Not on this item, Mr. Chair.
Do we have a motion for agenda item 6?
Mr. Chairman, Richard Lunt.
Yes.
I move that we approve the financial assistant resolution 2025-053. No, that's 7. WSD 026205 for 1.984 975. I think that this is one of the reasons that this fund was set up to help some of these, communities that are doing the best they can, and this is the only way they can truly upgrade and serve their constituents. So with that, I move that we approve that.
Got a motion. Do we have a second?
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I would make a second to that motion. This is Patrice Horseman.
Horseman. Okay, we got a motion and a second. If there's no other discussion, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Thanks for being here. We will go to agenda item 7. In fact, we will hear agenda items 7 and 8 together. It's the same applicant. And this is City of Bisbee. Lindsay, can you take us through these two items?
Absolutely. So for agenda item 7, they have, the city of Bisbee is requesting 1.992 million. Item number 8, they are requesting 2 million. Both of these requests are for individual but related projects, which are part of the Cochise Conservation and Recharge Network plan to implement a regional network of land and water management projects. This would be for the city of Bisbee to implement their recharge project. So the number 7 would be the construction of a reclaimed water pump station and gravity flow pipeline adjacent to the San Pedro Riparian National Conservation Area. The pump station would be adequately designed to meet the initial amount of 200 acre-feet of reclaimed water being recharged with a future plan of up to 600 acre-feet. It is a large effort with multiple partnerships involved. And we did note that the timeline for this project's construction phase is expected to start in 2028. The request does include some costs for the planning, permitting, and engineering costs, which will be occurring before construction. The city does have one existing WIFA loan secured, which is in good standings, and if this request or request number 7 was a loan, the debt service payments would exceed the revenue available. So at this time, Bisbee does not have the capacity to take on additional debt without an adjustment in revenues or ongoing expenses. If we go to the next slide, we have the second request from Bisbee, which is, like I said, related to the first. This request would be to fund the 14-mile pipeline from the new pump station to the recharge site, which would allow for the 200 acre-feet of reclaimed water to be recharged. The other relevant financial capability information is still the same for this project as the previous. We should have applicant representatives online, I believe, and to answer any questions. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions for Lindsay or staff? Yes, Mr. Ted.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is probably mostly a question for Joe, maybe also for Lindsay. That the two projects that we have, or one is the effluent treatment project and the other one is the pipeline. Although they're characterized as two projects, really one is not good without the other. So in my mind, this means this is one project. So I'd like a reminder about what the funding limitations are on a per project basis and what the definition of a project is.
I can look that up, just give me 1 second.
But yes, as far as financial assistance, we are able to offer up to 5 million per project with 2 million as grant, 3 million as loan. So if you were considering these two applications as one project, that would limit it to $2 million grant. But determining if this is one project or two is the difficult question.
But they applied as two projects, correct?
They applied as two projects.
Right.
So to answer part of your question, then I'll go pull the definition for you. Under ARS 49-1274, in compliance with any applicable requirements, an eligible entity may apply to the authority for and accept and incur indebtedness as a result of a loan or any other financial assistance from the Water Supply Development Revolving Fund for water supply development projects in this state. So that's your general grant of authority for providing financial assistance for water supply development projects in this state. Under ARS 49-1273, the limitation that Lindsay was just referencing is that monies in the Water Supply Development Fund may be reused for the following purposes: making loans to eligible entities in this state under the section I just read you for water supply development projects within this state. A single loan shall not exceed 3 million. Making grants or providing technical assistance to eligible entities for water supply development projects in this state. A single grant shall not exceed 2 million. I can get you the definition of water supply development project if you prefer, but I think that may have answered your question there.
Well, yeah, yes and no. And my main question here is based
Turn
on.
your mic on.
Oh, I'm sorry. My main question here is that these two projects can't stand alone. One cannot be a project without the other. So in my mind, this is really one thing. And so I just want to make sure that we're not violating the letter of the statute or the spirit of the statute by separating this into two projects.
Your statutory authority, it does include, it's plural, right? So making loans to eligible entities under this state or making grants to eligible entities under this state for water supply development projects in this state, and then dictates, I think this is where your question is coming in, with the limitation being a single grant shall not exceed 2 million. And so essentially your question is, by separating this into two projects when one can't stand alone, have you created a single grant that will exceed the $2 million?
Exactly.
Through two
Yes.
Exactly, yes. That's the question.
So your water supply development definition is pretty broad. There's, subpart A is acquiring water or rights to contract for water to augment water supply of a provider. Subsection B is planning, designing, building, or developing water-related facilities, which is its own defined term, for any of the following purposes: conveyance, delivery, storage, recovery, reclamation, reuse, replenishment of groundwater, active or passive stormwater recharge, or conservation through reducing existing water use. I think the question before the committee today is going to be whether or not you believe that falls under that definition as a single project or not. As far as a legal statutory interpretation, I think you have sufficient information to go either way for it. If you do feel that this is a single project and that and that therefore it would not be able to stand alone on its own, then the statute would dictate that a grant is capped at 2 million. If it is two distinct projects as would fit under the definition I just read to you, we can do that. Alternatively, you could also request staff go back and take a further look at that and come back with a recommendation on this particular point, as we had not prepared one for you today.
Well, maybe that's what we will end up doing, but I'm just thinking about a scenario where, for one reason or another, and one reason could be the double solid line that Lindsay referred to earlier. Let's just say, hypothetically, that project number 1 here and project number 2 were on either side of that line. And so we were able to approve the project above the line because we had remaining grant funding available, but we were not able to approve the project below the line because we would have been out of funding having approved the first one. So the first project that got approved with funding would not actually be able to produce anything that would be useful to the community because it wouldn't have a pipeline to get it from point A to the point of use. So, and that's a contrived situation, but I think it's illustrative that to be a project that has to actually meet the water supply development needs of that community, and standing alone, these two requests do not do that on their own. And I'm being a little bit of a stickler here, but I think that means that it is a single project. And I'm concerned about the appearance of gamesmanship, and not accusing anyone of doing that, but the interpretation or the appearance of gamesmanship to basically approve a $4 million grant that does not comply with the statutory authority.
Sure, and really what it comes down to, right, is that definition of project. What does a project entail? And while this is not applicable to the Water Supply Development Committee, the Water Conservation Grant Fund Committee did deal with this issue as well. In statute, there's undefined terms for Water Conservation Committee of programs and projects and what those mean. The Water Conservation Grant Fund did go ahead and get some rules passed last year which defined program and project for that fund. Now, those definitions wouldn't apply here, but can read you the definition of project as Water Conservation Grant Fund applies. And that would be activities that are confined to a particular time and place and that result in a single deliverable. And that is how WIFA has interpreted the term project as it applies to the Water Conservation Grant Fund.
Mr. Chair? Yes, Mr. Cook.
Okay, so thank you, Joe. That was helpful. I'm not suggesting that necessarily that we adopt that for this purpose. We may need something like that. But the last part of that, that definition of a project to have a specific deliverable. So a project standing on its own that doesn't have a deliverable is not a project under that definition.
Ms. Montgomery, you have your hand up.
Well, thank you. And I appreciated Mr. Cook's points because that's what I was looking at too here. And I'm trying to understand it because we want to get this right and we have a limited amount of grants available. And if these sort of things could be segmented in a way that allows sort of that, I'm not saying double dipping, and this is certainly not the intent of the applicant, that is very clear, then that is concerning. And so, you know, I had a couple other questions I wanted to present, to ask about, but on this issue, this may be something, maybe some additional analysis from staff might be appropriate.
Thank you for that one. But apart from trying to define what a project is, the committee would have the prerogative, just as we had the prerogative to say, hey, staff, only bring up so many grants to us, or divide the fund 60-40. We could also give that sort of direction without having staff to define what a project is. We could set sort of, at least for the short term, some sort of policy or recommendation from this committee that we would max out grants per applicant. That's not statutory, but that could be is that correct? The committee could decide for a policy, because we are limited on funds, maybe we just, in the short term, at least, just cap each entity from only getting $2 million in grants.
So these funding decisions that are before the committee and will eventually be before the board are discretionary decisions, right? There is no statutory or constitutional right to receive funding from WIFA. So how this committee makes those decisions is our discretionary ones, provided you're not making arbitrary and capricious decisions or violating a policy that you've previously stated. That would be within the realm of your authority.
Mr. Chairman, this is Sue again.
Yes.
I do have some additional questions as well, but on this one, it seems to me that whether the question about interdependentness of a project, in other words, can one exist without the other? I don't know if we need to go out and define project as we did in the conservation grants, or when we define project or program. But I do think that there's some analysis that could be done internally without having to go further to just make sure that if we're doing this, these are two projects that are independently eligible. Right now, I just worry about them being that, and I think Mr. Cook did a much better job saying it, but I had flagged it as well in my notes. So maybe this is one that we have maybe Joe review again or the staff review again and come back and just confirm if these are indeed two projects as best as we can interpret them, then, you know, they're independently eligible.
Yeah. Yeah, do you have a?
Yes.
Mr.
And I appreciate the question and the direction of the discussion that is going, but I also appreciate that in some of these rural communities, they are struggling right now and they're trying to improve. And maybe many years ago, their systems were built when the codes weren't quite as stringent, and probably some of them were built without any code. And I just hope that we don't set a limit where some people, this is the only way that they're going to be able to improve their systems. And I know that's sort of talking out of both sides of my mouth, but still, some of this money was given for those communities that this is their only way that they can improve and come up and serve their constituents in the best manner possible. And I certainly appreciate Ted and Susan's concerns, because I have those same concerns, but the other side of me says, I live out there and I know what some of these communities are struggling with. So
I appreciate those comments, and I think you're right. As a clarification off that, this is sort of highest priority. I mean, they qualify for 100% grant, right, Lindsay?
That's correct. They do qualify for 100% grant.
So we've identified this according to our criteria, our rubric, that they, just as you said, Mr. Lunt, that they need the money and they don't necessarily have the ability to get a loan. Sue, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I don't disagree with anything you said, and certainly anything Mr. Lent said, and everything on that is true. I think it's just a question of, are we talking about two eligible projects? If we are, then I think that this is something we move beyond. I just
Yeah.
want to make sure we are, because I agree with Mr. Lent 100%. And these things are pieced together over time. So with regard to this, my sense of it is, though, we need to be sure that they are, and I'm not sure we are sitting here right now, unless Mr. Satelli is going to say that.
Here's my concern, is I don't want to hold up progress while, on at least some of it, while we answer that question. Is there a way for us to maybe approve one of them and then, get clarification on the other? We could table one and pass the other. I'm just talking out
Yeah.
loud. I don't know if there's comments from the committee. Yes, Mr. Cook.
I think that's an intriguing idea, but the, as far as being able to move forward on something, but one without the other, if we approve the one for $2 million and then for some reason we can't, back to my original example, can't do that or don't do that, because we're out of money or whatever else, then it's useless. It's a use of $2 million that has an opportunity cost for something else we could have done, and that community doesn't have anything. I'd rather have two projects for pumping and pipeline together and consider it that way. So cut it that way. If we want to do something today, approve one project for half of project one and half of project two, and have another one that we could consider later, if necessary. And neither of those then would, at least in my mind, require the definition of, is this a separate project? Although if we had two identical things, I guess you'd run into the same, but at least it would allow us and the applicant to have something that would work without violating the $2 million cap on a project.
I appreciate that. Any other comments?
But, Mr. Chairman, I
Yes.
hate to belabor this, but I had a couple other questions for this project that maybe staff could help answer.
Please, go ahead.
Okay, the first one is a material one, a substantive question. And that is that it's my understanding from reading the materials that they're going to be recharging this water adjacent to the San Pedro Riparian National Conservation Area. That's correct, right? In partnership with others that are named. So my question is a legal question that maybe can't be answered right now, but if they are doing that, how do they, are they planning on subsequently recovering that water in sort of an indirect potable reuse sense? Or are they using it merely to recharge, not merely, it's an important task, to recharge the aquifer? Because the challenge is, if they are recovering right now it's not about recovery, I understand that, it's about recharging, but they would be potentially interfering with the Federal Reserve water rights of the Sprinka. And so I just want to make sure that if they're recharging this, understanding a little more about how that benefits their water supply system, or are they recharging and ultimately not going to be able to recover it because it's adjacent to Sprinka, which now has, at least preliminarily, decreed water rights under federal law.
So, yeah, I can't answer that one, but we do have the applicants online.
Yeah, let's ask that of the applicant.
So Matthew and Steve, I have enabled both of your mics. You'll just have to unmute, and then you'll be able to speak into the meeting as well.
Karen.
Yes, we can.
Hey, this is Steve talking. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, we're all part of the Sierra Vista, sub-watershed. And so, the aquifer that we're pulling the groundwater out of is the same, basin that the water is being, recharged back into. So we're staying in the same basin. So basically, this is the back end of the system. This is where we put the water back.
Right, but what I'm reading in the materials is that it says here very specifically, let's see, 200 acre foot of reclaimed water to be recharged through a basin or other infiltration mechanism to the San Pedro Riparian National Conservation Area. That's an area that has water rights that are decreed under federal law with early rights for the federal government. So I just want to make sure you're putting this in, you're going to be able to get the benefit of it and recover it. Or is that the plan long term?
Yeah, that is the plan. Now there's people that are a lot smarter than me that could probably be a lot more help to you, but basically the CCRN, the Cochise Conservation and Recharge Network,
Yes.
consists of members who are all adjacent to the Sprinka.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I'm
it's
familiar
all
with
the
it.
Sierra Vista, yeah, it's all the Sierra Vista sub-base. That includes the Fort Huachuca. Yeah. Our big partners, the Department of Defense at Fort Huachuca.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. I'm just trying to understand, you're putting the water in, is the goal ultimately to be able to recover it or recover additional water from the aquifer?
Yes, now our water supply comes from a well field, just south of town that's owned by, Arizona Water Company.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, we're right now fine tuning it, but we're discharging approximately 400 acre feet a year into the watershed. This agreement for this pump system specifically calls for a minimum of 200 acre feet. Arizona Water Company would like to be able to do the same thing once we get done with this project. So it's all, now, if you need more technical information, I'm sorry, I can obtain that for you. But I don't think that the network would be supporting this project if we couldn't do it.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting you can't put it in. I just want to make sure it's an actual water supply development project that you can eventually take out. But
Yeah.
that's fine, Mr. Chairman. And the reason I'm asking these questions is I do work down there, and I'm very familiar with the Sprinka situation. And so when I saw that, that's why I flagged it. And additionally, I'm putting my committee hat on, which is a little different than my board hat. So that's why I'm trying to ask these questions that might be a little more detailed than I might ask once we percolate up to a board level. So I appreciate that. And I don't
Susan,
know.
if you'd like more information, I'm imagine since you've done work down here that you're familiar with some of the players down here, specifically Holly Richter.
Yes.
Okay, Holly would be my expert on that.
Okay. Well, Mr. Chairman, I don't want to belabor this if the will of the committee is to move this forward. Thank you.
Appreciate those comments. I guess I have a question for the applicant. You've heard some of the conversation today. I think as a committee, we're still trying to understand, making sure that we're under the legal, the statutory definitions of what one project is. So if I could be blunt and ask you if, you know, from your perspective, is it helpful to support these two applications in some way? Or would, from your perspective, would it be better for us to get some clarification because you would need that full, $3.9 million, in order for you to move any of the project forward?
Actually, from my perspective, working with my partners, if I only had a choice to get half, I would pick the project, 32-2025, the pump station. I pick that every time because I can probably get, the Department of Defense or some of the other partners, to pony up for the pipe.
Thank you for that, response to that question. Any other comments or questions from the committee? We have a couple options as a committee. We could vote to approve one or both of these. We could ask staff to give us some more analysis on the question that has been asked, or as a chairman, I suppose I could also table it to ask for some of that analysis. But I'd like to hear a little bit more from
Mr. Chairman?
committee. Yes.
May I ask the committee, on the first project, on the 32, the water demand points, 150 out of 150. The project benefit points, 130 out of 130. Feasibility points, 60 out of 60. Financial need points, 100 out of 100. Then you go to the second project. Let me get down there. And water demand points, 100 out of 150. Project benefit points, 120 out of 30. Feasibility points, 60 out of 60. Financial need points, 70 out of 100. Why was the first one 100 out of 100 and the second one is 70 out of 100? And I just...
That is an excellent question, Richard. I have to dig into that question though, just for a minute, so,
Okay.
yeah.
I just... Okay. Thank you, because
It would make sense that they should be the same, absolutely.
that's, yeah.
Good question. All staff's looking at that.
Sorry
Any
about
other?
that, Chairman. You can...
No, any other questions?
We do have a public comment.
We have a request for the public to comment on this.
We do, Mr. Chairman. We did have someone submit a request to speak. They had to jump off the meeting a little bit early, but did provide their question in writing. So I will just kind of read that into the record. It says, please read this into the record for item number 7 and 8. During the long course of planning for this pipeline, I recall in other venues, there's been mention of recharge in the area of the NACO supply pumps for the Arizona Water Company. As best I can understand the project description for the pump station, I don't see any recharge proposed in that area. Without this component, I don't see why it would qualify for assistance. And there are also some comments as well about the connection to Sprinka. The overall project is to assist Sprinka had to have sufficient water to be healthy. I support these efforts as part of a solution to protecting the river, but have questions about the impact on the ongoing adjudication. So just wanted to read those into the record. I don't think it requires a response, but.
Okay.
Director McGuire, I may have missed it. Could you say the name of?
I'm sorry, it did not say that.
Thank you.
Joe, good point. This is from Tricia Jaredetz. And she did fill out the public comment form.
And she, just a member of the public.
Yes, Lindsay.
And I have an answer. That was a typo on staff's part for the 032 project. That should have been 70 out of 100 for financial need points, but the 350 out of 440 is correct. So that was just a typo on my part.
Okay, because both of those, they were the
The
same.
total is 350 for both. It should have been 70 out of 100 for both
Okay.
financial need
Thank
points.
you, that makes.
Do we have a motion by any members of the committee? Then I am. Oh,
I think you're gonna say the same thing I am, so go ahead.
I was going to say then I am leaning towards tabling for now, so we can get some clarification on the questions that have been asked.
General Counsel Joe Soteli, just to make sure that we do get the analysis that you're looking for. Here, the question would be whether or not agenda items 7 and 8 should be treated as a single project for purposes of the limitations under ARS 49-1273, and thus subject to only a $3 million loan and a $2 million grant, or whether they can apply under two separate water supply development projects and receive two separate $2 million maximum grants. Correct?
That sounds good to me. Does that sound good to you, Ted? You were the first one to bring that up.
Well, yeah, I think so, but, and that's certainly where we would begin. But if the staff's analysis leans more toward, no, they're really a single project, then I think that I would add to the direction with the concurrence of the remainder of the committee to re-engage with this applicant and see if there's some way to repackage things so that they can have a successful project and still live within the financing terms, rather than telling them to pick one, because that really is, that's a lose-lose.
Great, so there's additional work on a legal analysis side and additional work on a staff engagement side, two components.
Yes, well, with that direction, we'll table the items 7 and 8.
And again, for point for clarification, I suspect that you would like to see this at the next committee meeting.
Yes, and I would say bring it back as soon as we can, so we can move the project forward. And I can table that, my prerogative as a chair, right? We don't need a vote on that?
Correct, you can.
Okay, so done then. We will move to agenda items 9 and 10. Similar situation as two applications, but a single applicant. So we'll hear those. Lindsay, if you could take us through 9 and 10.
Thank you very much. First to note for item number 9, we did have the dollar amount incorrectly listed on the agenda as 1.977 million. It was correct in all of the board materials and public materials with the correct amount of $1,997,106. So just to note that correction. And I will present these two as in one go, but I think this will be a little bit easier to determine that these are two separate projects. They will be for the same applicant, so it's Heber Domestic Water Improvement District has applied with two applications. This first one for the 1.997 million, and then the second one for $2 million. The Heber DWID manages two separate public water systems within Heber, Arizona. So this is one of their two requests for financial assistance for the project to consolidate their Black Canyon subdivision system with their main Heber DWID system. They plan to do so by installing a water line to connect the two separate water systems, to consolidate the systems and provide some redundancy and help to ensure that both systems can support each other in cases of issues or emergencies. This project would also include booster pump upgrades to ensure that the consolidated systems can meet their current and future demands. The district has no existing debt and in 2024 had a loss of net revenue. If this request or the following request was a loan, the annual debt service amount would exceed the revenue available for debt service payments. Therefore, the district does not have the capacity to take on additional debt without an adjustment in revenues or ongoing expenses. And if we go to the next slide here, this is their $2 million request from Hebert Wood, which involves the construction of a storage tank and upgrades of the automation controls for their main water system. So separate from the previous water system, and it would be helping to address the deteriorating conditions of the existing tank, which is at critical failure state. So they are really hoping to rehabilitate or replace this aging asset, which is at risk of catastrophic failure. The similar financial capabilities apply for this application as the previous. We do have Blake Anderson with Mogollon Water available in the room as the applicant representative for any questions. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Any questions first for Lindsay? So 2 systems under the Heber Domestic District, Improvement District, but 2 separate systems.
Correct.
Mr. Chair, I have the same question. When was the last rate increase for the systems?
Blake, if you want to,
Blake?
if you're available, take that.
Just make sure the light on the mic is green and state your name before you speak.
This is like a congressional hearing, huh? It was this year.
This year.
Yeah, they ran a loss. I think that in typical what we see with small water systems, things build and build and build kind of behind the scenes. Then all of a sudden there's something catastrophic that happens that starts the litmus for we need to make all these changes. And so they raised rates immediately last year just to try to start to build up their reserves. And their board is actively in the process of actually going through some training on budgets, capital improvement plannings, and then ultimately some rates. So they're pretty actively engaged in the process.
I'm sorry, we cannot hear who's ever speaking.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Sorry about that. The board is actively going through trainings on rates, capital improvement plannings. They made a rate increase this past year, and now I think they're looking at what are their next steps going forward to really accelerate that process. Because when you don't raise rates for a significant number of years and you start looking at what inflation's doing, they're far behind where they should be, even with that rate increase. So.
Good question, Richard. Those sounds like though that in the process you've raised rates this last recently and working on that and a plan sort of moving forward.
Does anyone else have anything? I'm ready to make a motion if.
Richard's ready to make motions. If other discussions, other questions for the applicant, staff? All right, I'll entertain a motion.
Okay, Mr. Chair, once again, I checked the numbers, they jive. And I think this is another example of what the legislature had in mind when they formed this pot of money. And so I would move that we approve agenda item 9 and 10 for the amounts so noted on the agenda.
Sue Montgomery, second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you all for your time.
All right, we will move to agenda item 11. Recommend for approval financial assistance resolution 2025-062, the Tri-City Regional Sanitary District. Lindsay, or Scott will take us through this one.
Yes, I will. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tri-City Regional Sanitary District is a sanitary district that was established in 2011 with the formation and mission to improve the quality of life in an unincorporated area encompassing approximately 5.45 square miles in southern Gila County, bordered on the east side by the city of Globe and on the west side by the town of Miami. Nearly 90% of the residential properties within the district have on-site treatment systems, which are cesspools or substandard septic tanks, which is in violation of several federal and state laws and regulations. Tri-City Regional Sanitary District's large project was divided into 3 phases per recommendations by the USDA. Currently, the total project is priced at $112 million. It's $49 million for phase 1, 33 for phase 2, and 30 for phase 3. The district has received a letter of condition or a commitment from the USDA for phase 1 costs, but does not have a letter of condition for phase 2 and phase 3, as the USDA must approve phase 1 bidding before phase 2 and phase 3 letters can be provided. With phase 1 bidding awaiting approval, the district is requesting $5 million in financial assistance, $2 million in grant and $3 million in loan from the Water Supply Development Revolving Fund for phase 2 costs. Pursuant to WIFA policy and procedure, this project qualifies for 60% loan and 40% grant consideration. The district has historical revenue through ad valorem tax assessments to cover administrative costs, budget overrides, and special district needs. If the TRSD is unable to secure funding from the USDA, the projected performance indicates that the city will not meet the requirements of the loan. However, the operator has the ability to adjust the ad valorem taxes to cover the operating costs and ensure the system remains operational. Additionally, by the time the first payment would be due under a water supply development loan, which has a 36-month delay, they should have phase 1 connected and returning revenue from the customers. Total WIFA funding amounts total $10,568,000, including $3 million through the Water Conservation Grant Fund, a $2,068,000 100% forgivable SRF loan for phase 1 construction, and a $5.5 million SRF design loan, which is subsequently paid off in July of 2024. The district has obtained additional funding for phase 2 of approximately $10 million from several sources. So with that, we do have representatives in the room. I see Attorney Tim Stratton and Mike Krebs, the engineer. So thank you.
Great. First, do we have questions for staff, for Scott, on this one from the committee?
Looks like Sue does.
Sue, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I didn't have any questions, but I had a comment I wanted to make, but I can wait till after all questions have been addressed.
Well, if there's any questions, I guess let me just clarify. They've received $3 million in conservation fund, additional $5 million or from SRF loans, different loans. Or
Yeah, $3 million from the Water Conservation Grant Fund, $2,068,000, which is SRF, but it was a 100% forgivable loan. And then they were approved for a $5.5 million design loan. They did not actually borrow all that amount, but they were approved for it. That loan has been paid off.
it has been paid off?
Yes.
Okay. So they've been cobbling up money to finish the project, and now looking for $2 million in grants and $3 million in a loan from the Water Supply Development Fund. Okay. Doesn't look like they're, oh, go ahead, Richard.
So, Scott, so what's the total exposure to, not exposure, but the amounts that they've received from WIFA so far then?
Just over 10.5.
10.5.
That actually reduced because I think it's only $4 million from the design loan, so that's the amount that was committed.
Yeah. Good.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Sue.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to say a couple things. One, when people realize, and most people do not realize that there are cesspools that still we're dealing with in rural Arizona. I think this is a good reminder for anybody from the public that's watching that this is something that small communities are dealing with. And I think, Tri-City ought to be completely commended for their creativity, and having to cobble together all of these different funds is hard. And they're doing it and they're making it work together. And I just wanted to comment on that because it is a very impressive thing. And if we could give $5 million in grants, we would, I think. I mean, this is one of those projects that is that worthy. And this is a great also example of someone who's doing both grants and loans. So they're coming at it with both sources of funding under this. So this is, as Richard would probably say more eloquently than me, this is exactly the type of thing that this fund was supposed to do. But I just want to commend them for coming back to WIFA, being persistent, putting all these different funds together, because it's like a jigsaw puzzle and they're doing it. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Really appreciate it. Thanks, Ms. Montgomery. Other comments or questions? Comments or questions for the applicant? Do we have any requests from the public to speak on the item?
We do not, Mr. Chair.
With that, then I'd entertain a motion.
Mr.
Go
Chair.
ahead, Sue.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Richard, I got ahead of you there. This is Sue Montgomery. I'd like to make a motion that the committee approve recommended approval of financial assistance resolution 2025-062 Tri-City Regional Sanitary District in the amount of $5 million in the grant and loans as shown here.
Mr. Chair, I'd second that.
We have a motion and a second. If there's no other discussion, we'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? The motion passes unanimously. We'll move to agenda item 12. For the Financial Assistance Resolution 2025-059 Wyndham Domestic Water Improvement District. Lindsay, will you take us through it?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we have the Wendon Dwid, who is requesting just over $100,000 to install a water filling station where customers rely on water hauling in the McMullen Valley area. This water station would be available for water haulers to fill up 24/7 with the use of a credit card or field access card. This would allow for significantly increased access to water and ensure that the Wendon Dwid is compensated for supplying that water. If the request was a loan, the system revenues could support the debt service required. However, WIFA staff does want to acknowledge the financial assistance amount is very minimal at just $101,000 requested. We had no significant managerial, technical, financial findings with this, and there's no previous WIFA financial assistance from the Water Supply Fund for this project. We should have the applicant representative online to answer any questions. And with that, I'll turn it back to you.
Great. Any questions for Lindsay on this? Staff? Any questions for the applicant? No questions for the applicant. Do we have a request for the public on this one?
We do not, Mr. Chair.
No request from the public. I'd entertain a motion.
I'll take a turn.
Mr. Cook.
Yeah, Ted Cook. Mr. Chair, I recommend, or I move that the committee recommend to the board approval of Financial Assistance Resolution 2025-059 Wyndham Domestic Water Improvement District.
Mr. Chair, Richard Lund, I will second that.
We've got a motion and a second. If there's no other discussion, we'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, the motion passes unanimously. Agenda item 13, recommend for approval of Financial Assistance Resolution 2025-056, the Town of Duncan. Lindsay, would you take us through it?
Absolutely. So we have the Town of Duncan, who is requesting just over $1.7 million for their project to address the critical issues for one of their two public water systems, their Hunter Estates water system, which has outdated and corroded infrastructure. Project components include replacing 2,300 feet of water line, installing valves, and connecting the Hunter Estates system to Duncan's central water system with water lines. The goal is to reduce water loss, improve efficiency, and ensure the reliability of their long-term water supplies. There have been some past events that raised some managerial and financial concerns, as noted in the due diligence. However, staff acknowledges the town has been working to address those issues, and the hiring of the permanent town manager and staff has improved their situation. Duncan has received $77,000 from the Water Supply Development Revolving Fund for the purchase of equipment needed to do the water line replacements. And they've also received just over $370,000 from the Water Conservation Grant Fund for water line replacements and the addition of a SCADA system. In reviewing the financial capability, it was noted that at this time, the Town of Duncan does not have the capacity to take on additional debt without an adjustment in revenues or ongoing expenses. We should have the town manager, Terry Hinton, available for any questions. And with that, I'll turn it back to you.
Great. First, do we have any questions for staff on this application? Do we have any questions for the applicant?
Yes, when was their last rate increase?
Mr. Linton?
Oh, and I apologize, he's in the room.
And if you wouldn't mind just stating your name for the record before you answer the question.
Terry Hinton.
Thank you, sir.
The last rate increase we had on water was not the previous budget, the previous budget year. We had grant funding, private grant funding, and we replaced all of our water meters with AMR meters. And at that same time, we adjusted the rates upward to try to cover all our revenues. Before, we were losing money in all our utilities, and currently we're not making them much, but we're making them. We're in the black.
Mr. Hinton, I have a question. Mr. Lunt claims the Duncan area is home. Do you claim him?
You bet I do.
You don't have to answer that.
Boy, I see I got a lot of friends.
Any other comments on this application? Questions? I'd
No, if
entertain a
there-
motion.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the financial assistance resolution 2025-056, Town of Duncan. WSD 054205 for the amount of $1,729,640.
Okay. Second that, the home of Richard Lunt and also Town of Duncan.
Great. We've got a motion and a second on WSD 0452025. If there's no other discussion, we'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstained? The motion passes.
And Mr. Chairman, if I can make a comment, there again, these funds are exactly what are going to what they are intended to. I don't live in the town of Duncans. I live outside in a place called Luntville. And we have our own water system, but anyway,
I
they
did say
are
Duncan
truly,
area. That's what.
Yes.
under the management of Mr. Hinton, they are trying to make life better, and without these funds, it would virtually be impossible to correct some of the previous problems. So once again, this is exactly what these funds were created for. Thank you.
Appreciate that comment. Moving on to agenda item 14. Recommend for approval financial assistance resolution 2025-055 Town of Camp Verde. Lindsay, would you take us through the discussion?
Absolutely. So Camp Verde is requesting $2 million for the installation of 2 new storage tanks, booster pumps, electric power, backup generator, and a 12-inch looped water main. This project is expected to address the town's water storage deficiencies, which currently limits the capacity to less than half a day's demand. The town of Camp Verde has a SRF loan and an approved water supply resolution which has a $2 million grant and $1.6 million loan component. The SRF loan and water supply loan have a share of the pledge of the water system revenues. If this application was included as a loan with the other existing debts, that would result in a drop to the debt service coverage from 1.34 to 1.06 times in 2024. And just to head off Richard's question, we did include this. The town approved a multi-year rate increase in November of 2023 in order to help fund future investments in drinking water solutions. So we did include on the slide the previous WIFA financial assistance from the water supply fund, which was for an unrelated project, but just to note that they are a previous water supply applicant. And then we should have Jeff Lowe, who is in the room with us, the utilities director, if the committee has any questions. Thank you.
Great. Do we have any questions for staff? Any questions for the applicant? Any requests to speak from the public on this item?
No, Mr. Chair.
Is there any other further discussion? I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I
Patrice?
would make a motion to approve financial assistance resolution 2025-055, Town of Camp Verde, WSD-050-2025 in the amount of $2 million.
Mr. Chairman, Richard Lunn, I will second that.
We have a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, we'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed? Any abstained? The motion passes. Agenda item 15, recommend for approval of financial assistance resolution 2025-058, Town of Jerome. Lindsay?
Thank you, and this will be the last project for consideration today. So we have the Town of Jerome, who's requested just over $1.5 million for their project, which would repair crucial segments of Jerome's antiquated water infrastructure dating back to the early 1900s, with a focus on enhancing the system's sustainability and efficiency. The proposed facility improvements include replacing approximately 1,800 linear feet of deteriorated and partially exposed pipelines that have led to significant water loss. In reviewing the financial capabilities of the system, it was noted that if this was included as a loan, the annual debt service payments would exceed the amounts available. So at this time, the Town of Jerome does not have the capacity to take on additional debt without an adjustment in revenues or ongoing expenses. Additionally, we did include the previous WIFA financial assistance that was provided to the Town of Jerome for a separate project, which was $1.4 million for their Mescal Siphon and School Street Regulator project. We should have the applicant representative available for any questions. And with that, back to you.
Well, any questions from the committee for Lindsay or staff? Any questions for the applicant?
Yes, Richard Lunt, once again, when was their last rate case?
Do we have some representing the applicant?
It looks like, yeah. Hi, Brett. Just go ahead and state your name for the record, and then you can answer the question.
Hi, Brett Klein from the Town of Jerome. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so we had a comprehensive rate case which began 1 year ago. It's a multi-year rate increase. It extends into 2029, bringing about a total of approximately 47% increase to our users from 2023 to 2029. So a very significant rate increase to continue service and operations and attempt to provide some level of maintenance and repair on our very old system.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question and answer. Any other questions? There's not any additional questions or discussions. I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, Richard Lunt, I recommend approval of financial assistance resolution 2025-058, Town of Jerome, WSD 040-2025 for the amount of $1,551,043.
Mr. Chairman, Sue Montgomery, second.
We've got a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, we'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? The motion passes unanimously. That's the end of our applications. We'll move to agenda item 16, call to the public. Do we have any general comments from the public? Anyone who would like to speak? Have we gotten any requests?
No requests online or that I can see in the room, Mr. Chair.
No requests. That moves us to agenda item 17, agenda development. I think with the tabling, we have one item that we'll see on a future agenda. Are there other items that we want to see? Chelsea, you can lead us in any.
Well, seeing none, Mr. Chair, we will ensure that we, on the next committee agenda, which is tentatively scheduled for March 19th, so a month from today, we will make sure that we have additional staff report on the two applications that you mentioned, as well as what I anticipate will probably be another pretty grant-heavy round of applications as we try to go through the PPL in the order that it's listed. So if anything else comes up, let us know, but that's what we have on our list.
Great. Thank you for that. Agenda item.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
and just as a personal note to the staff, thank you for all the hard work you do. I know how difficult it is to go through all those applications and sort through them, and then you're gonna have a board ask questions, but thank you. We appreciate it. And, I appreciate this board and their effort because we're trying to do what's best for the citizens of Arizona. Thank you for indulging.
Yeah, appreciate that, Richard. That's great. You touched on our next meeting, Chelsea. It's March 19th, right after our board meeting at
Correct.
1 p.m.
So it would be the same schedule, the same cadence as today. I do have that as tentative. We will still poll the committee members to make sure that that works, but right now, plan on that.
Okay, that's great. That moves us to agenda item 19. If there's nothing further, we will adjourn the meeting of the WIFA Water Supply Development Committee. The time is now 2:16.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.